Hello and welcome to Get Good. This is another video in the series on the librarian I'm painting up, and in this one I am painting a shiny axe blade. The librarian has this power axe, and it is fitted in his hand. And the way the sculpt is that you kind of have to put it on as you're gluing everything, because it's like the parts itself will need some light gap filling at minimum. So instead I just cut off the axe head for me to have an easier time actually painting it up. What I ended up doing then was actually pinning the two halves. So this one is actually ready to go back on and to take a pin. So I've already painted in the rune. I'm unsure if I want to do more on it, like have it a bit brighter or something, but I'll see to that when everything is finished. But I did block it in and have it mostly finished at least. So the main thing for this video will be the reflections on the axe blade. The axe blade will be it will end up looking quite a lot like the one I did on Dante's axe actually, and I really like the look of it. The blade, or the sharp part itself on an axe like this, is actually not that big, so I've chosen to do, I oftentimes do stripes. It's just a matter of if the stripes are the way they are here, or they are going in the direction following the blade instead. This blade isn't like, there isn't that much room, I oftentimes will go for having the kind of stripy pattern go this way. On the Deathwing Terminator I'm doing, or Knight I'm doing at the moment, I chose to have his power sword have the stripy pattern go the other way. The main difference is that if you have the stripes kind of like I'm doing here, it creates a blade that looks incredibly sharp, because it gets kind of a chrome looking effect, as opposed to when you take the stripes in the direction following the blade, or the length of the blade, then it will get more of a look of a brushed kind of steel or iron. Either can be fine, but I really wanted, and I do enjoy the look of this more chromy look, because it just looks so super polished and sharp. So that's why I went for it. The reason why it looks so sharp and polished is chrome has that mirror effect, and that means it will be reflecting everything from the environment. when it is reflecting everything, you get like a lot of variation within the different reflections. That means you can have more than one like kind of shadow line even within these bright reflections. You can see here how I've built towards the top of the blade two very bright reflections. Then I have kind of a shadow in between, the one I'm at right now. Kind of a shadow in between. It isn't a deep shadow at all. It is a rather light shadow. It does look a bit more dark than it actually is because it's right next to a very bright spot. That is kind of an important thing to remember, because if I had put something like the base color here as that shadow, it would be incredibly stark, and it could potentially look a bit off. So because you kind of have that variation and those tons and tons of reflection lines, it gets a very chrome look. To talk a bit about how like where I'm putting reflections, it is generally up to oneself where to put them. There is no real right or wrong, especially in the sense that it is really up to the environment how a chrome finish would look, and you see a model on its own, so you can't really interpret anything from the environment. That is one thing, but another thing, the scale makes it so that you can't really distinguish anything like within those reflections anyways. So you're kind of making up what you want to show. I tend to do the top part bright, very bright. Cut it into one or two pieces. Here I cut it into two, and then I actually made a single bright line underneath it again. But here I cut it into two, had my biggest shadow, and then because it kind of curves towards the bottom, I like to have a reflection there, because curves tend to concentrate light. And then I did a small reflection towards the bottom too. That is basically almost entirely for readability, just to kind of start and end the blade in a way that kind of makes sense and makes it confined, so you can easily see this is the volume. So the colors themselves, not very complicated. I'm using rubber black, which is an AK color, and it is not exactly a black, but we are pretty close to black. And then I'm using Reaper color solid white. Those are the two colors I'm using. You can see the mint green on the palette too. I just put it there because I might want to go into talking about the rune itself, so I wanted it to be present. And if I accidentally went too far into the dark flat part of the like the axe head, I wanted to be able to paint some of that reflection back, or the shine from the rune. So it doesn't really end up being necessary at all. I started out by blocking in quite roughly even where I wanted to have these reflections, and while doing that I basically built my transition. So I took the rubber black, had a bit of white in it, and used that to sketch first. Then I took that same mix, dipped into the white, made a new puddle, reinforced on those reflections to make them brighter, then did the same again, dipped my brush into more white, made a new puddle, and so forth. And yeah, that's basically how I make a transition when it's only like 2 colors. I can make it as I go, and if I'm not really satisfied with the jumps, I can just add a bit more of, well, either the darker or the brighter color. So that's how the transition was made. You can see here how I've gotten to a point rather quickly where it already looks good. It's not perfectly blended or anything, but it does look pretty shiny. You get quite a lot from like the blade itself has a bit of painted in texture because you're doing it in those lines, which means if some of them get a bit stark or a bit rough, I guess, it's not a big deal, because in real life, chrome actually has these lines be quite noticeable. Generally, if you want to paint minis, we go for something that imitates realism but really isn't. And I mean that in the sense that you want it to be realistic looking, but you're really going for something that looks good. And those two things aren't necessarily the same. So sometimes you will be taking your artistic license and just even though it's maybe not strictly correct, you paint it differently than it would look like in real life. So you could get to a point like this, and you have the reflections painted in, somewhat blended, and you then highlight the edges, and that's it. That is perfectly fine. And especially if you wanted to do something cool like this for a unit or something, I would like for gaming, I would recommend going that route. Just getting the things blocked in, smoothing it a bit with a bit more stripes, and then next model. So a bit about how I'm building the reflections and the brightness of them and smoothness. I picked the top to be the brightest and the bottom to be not as bright. That means it is important not to go too deep with the shadows that cut the bright spot, and it is quite important to not go too bright on the bottom reflection, because if you go too bright on the bottom reflection, you kind of lose that effect of having a main reflection and a secondary or bounced reflection towards the bottom. So be mindful of it. Then when I'm blending things together, I'm basically just doing more stripes. It isn't really anything more than that. Going with stripes, a bit back and forth. Looking, if I'm satisfied, I stop. If not, well, I go back and do a bit more stripes. I'm painting here with a size 0, a size 1 Artist Opus brush. It is fairly new and has a nice tip, so it does make some sharp lines, though it is definitely not as sharp as my main Artist Opus size 00, for two reasons. One reason is size 00 is obviously smaller, and that means it has an even sharper tip. But also, my size 00 is quite worn at this point, and because it is worn, it has lost, I'd say, at least a third of the hairs, but that doesn't mean it lost its tip. So it's still very sharp. It's just even a bit thinner now than it was when I got it, which means it's probably more like a 000 at this point. And I'll be switching for that one just to do tighter lines. So another trick to, you can see I'm switching right here. Sorry for interrupting myself. And you can see how it is getting very thin. The brush itself is, it is very thin. You can see when you look at the ferrule how it's supposed to be a bit thicker. But yeah, at this point it has lost too many hairs, so but it's perfect for something like this, and I'll keep it around until it can't do any more work at all. But yeah, I'm now kind of blending these things, like the reflections, out, and I'm doing it with those striping motions. I don't want to go like all the way smooth. I want it to be still a tiny bit of looking like lines, but I do want it to be somewhat subtle. Another thing when you're blending it out is you can kind of imagine every one of these lines is basically like the middle part of the letter H. So the two sides, like the edges, are the legs of an H, and then you have the middle part of an H, which is all the lines. And sometimes when I'm blending it out, instead of doing the full middle stripe, I will only do the striping motion towards the edge, like the two legs of the H. I'll only do it there, so it kind of fades it out a bit. I'm being very, very, very gentle with the pressure. So I'm wiping off most of the paint, and then I'm putting not a lot of pressure. And that means it doesn't deposit that much paint and the stripy layer gets much softer that way. The dilution here is something like 50-50 water to paint, maybe a bit thicker even, because it is a bit warm here. So my wet palette tends to dry out, and you can see how the puddles are actually wanting to dry out a bit, not really making it easier to paint. Here you can see some of the lines I'm doing, they don't go all the way over to the other side of like catching both the two edges, especially when I'm trying to blend out the transition. I'm using the 2x magnification to be able to see, well, as much detail as possible, and, well, as much as makes sense. That means, because I want it to be fairly smooth, when it looks good under the magnification, it looks pretty good in real life too, when you pull it out from under the magnification. But as I said, it's not super important to be all the way smooth. It is pretty important to have all the edge going around the stripes be fully defined, both the inner and the outer edge. But that's about it. So if you're mindful of that, then it should be pretty good. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.